Hello and welcome everyone. My name is G and this is a video about the dewarding mentality and a few tips and tricks how to deward. The thing with dewarding is that in most cases it is really obvious where wards are placed, and I want to go into detail how we can exploit the enemy's mind and the information they give away when it comes to their warding style. So this video is about reading the enemy's mind basically. An important side note is that if you're not sure where the current warding spots are, please take a look at the common warding spot video that is already up. And this video can be found also exclusively on Gamers Class.
If you like this type of content, go to gamersclass.com. For just $5 a month, get your replays analyzed, join monthly live sessions with pro players, get access to our entire content library, win prizes, and more with our Supreme Dota 2 membership.
The first thing that I want to talk about is dewarding basics. So dewarding is mostly done playing the minimap itself, and the goal while playing the minimap is that you track the support's movement at all times. And the important part is that when you see supports on the minimap, that you instantly click on their inventory and check if they have wards. So when the patch was right here a few seconds ago, I should have instantly checked his inventory and see if he has wards and sentries as well as smoke in his inventory. Then the next thing that is super important is that we have an understanding of the common ward spots, and also that we understand at what positions standard areas are warded. So we have a basic understanding of entry points and general warding approaches according to the game state. And that's why the common warding spot video comes in handy here. Once we track the enemy movement frequently when they walk through our wards or we have vision on them, dewarding is basically an easy task, because the movement direction they take as well as areas that we didn't ward, so we lose vision on them, is basically the tool that we need to make an educated guess where the wards are placed. So dewarding is all about reading the enemy, and I have a perfect example here of how to do it. So the psychological aspects are the most important things to get. So the warding mentality of a player can be guessed at some point after the initial laning stage breaks down, and sometimes even earlier. The warding analysis is done by analyzing players' habits. So if we take a look, or generally speaking, if we take a look at this situation, we can clearly see that the player has wards in his inventory and that he dewarded, and that he might go in and place some deep wards. So when I do dewarding or warding and vision analysis for professional games, I basically track people's habits when it comes to ward placement. And if multiple wards are placed in the same area at a certain game state, I can guess that the ward will be placed there again in the next game. So for example, when I analyze professional teams and how they ward, I can basically make educated guesses with like 90% plus accuracy if I have enough data to tell where they ward. And this construct helps us also in our everyday pubs when we play support as well, because humans are creatures that have habits, and habits develop usually into patterns. So once we get the first few wards, or even the first ward during mid-game, we can most of the time already tell how the player will ward. And after that, we can make easy guesses or educated guesses where the wards are placed. So to give you an example of this player here, this would be the perfect example. So we should have checked his inventory while he was dewarding, and it was nighttime, and at nighttime players usually ward very aggressively. So we could have seen that he has 2 wards in his inventory, and we knew that he was missing for at least 1 minute until he showed on this lane. And he was harassing the Queen of Pain out very aggressively here to make room for his ward endeavor. So this alone would tell us that this entire area is warded right now, 100%. The question is, how do we know where he warded? So we need to make the first educated guess, and that's basically place a random sentry to get the cliff dewarded. And that's where we hit the jackpot. Because at this point, when the player has free reign where he can ward and we find the first cliff ward, we already know everything we need to know about the player. So the player is not sneaky. The player wants maximum vision all the time, and that's what we can exploit now, because we exactly know how he wards. So if we hit this ward and the second ward was placed, it is very likely that the ward on this cliff is also there. So basically, whenever we start dewarding, we try to check the standard ward spots first, and if we hit on the standard ward spots, we know. A very important side note is that ward positions are also given away by place. So if we take a look into this game a little later, people will start, we actually dewarded this now. So people will start making plays in areas that have been warded. Sadly, there's no dive here at this point. But we can see that we have had a very deep movement here, and we only hit 1 ward. So at this point, we should know that this area is still warded. So basically, whenever people make plays on your map, you know that in most cases it's warded and that you should deward. Also, ward positions can also be easily spotted by enemy movement when you approach them across the map. So if you would approach the mid lane here from this side with 1 or 2 players and you pose a threat to the enemy mid laner, you can basically guess from his movement if he suddenly stops hitting or he repositions behind the creep wave, like here, while you're approaching. You know that there must be vision somewhere around this area. And this is how you basically spot most wards. So for example, if the Ursa would move over with +1 onto the Nature's Prophet and suddenly he stops attacking, or he repositions into the tree line, or he repositions to this position, you would know that somewhere around this area there must be a ward. Another thing is that while you do those movements and you rotate, that you have your camera constantly on the targets you're rotating on, especially when you play support, because every movement adjustment has to be read, and you need to think about actively if there could be a ward. So if you don't have your camera on the hero you're rotating on, it's impossible for you to tell if there's wards or not. So please, if you move away from your hero and start looking at what the enemy is doing while you rotate onto them. Then another very frequently ward scenario is that when players invade areas together, and especially if the enemy supports are around. So for example, if we, with this combination of players, would move here right now, it would be very, very likely that if the supports are with us and the Queen of Pain is a support, you should have a ward, that the area gets warded. So whenever there's invasions going on into jungle areas with multiple players, you need to be aware of the fact that supports could be with them. Try to spot if the supports are with them and then go for the deward. The important part is that after the enemy takes control over certain jungle areas on your end, that you do not walk in here alone and try to deward stuff. You will instantly die. So for example, if the enemy team takes control over the top area and they have a deep ward, and you know it might be warded, and your team is playing bottom and you're like, I'm gonna go for this D ward, you will walk in and the entire team will instantly kill you and you will gain nothing. So if you lose control over areas and you know there might be wards, please never ever go there alone. Gather your team and then go for the D ward. Then another very common scenario is that you place wards and people instantly deward. So let's assume this ward runs out and it doesn't get dewarded, and you're like, okay, I need a new ward down here, and you walk over from this side and you have a sentry placed here, and you know there is no vision here, so everything is dewarded. So you go for a more risky ward and place it a little bit forwarded, but this ward will spot you and they will instantly deward this ward. Then you know that the cliff must be warded, because you have sentries here. You know this can't be warded, so the only available ward position is this one. It might be here, it might be here, it might be here, or it might be here. The thing is, if you have sentries here and you read the enemy movement and you know that there were no supports down here, it's very unlikely that it's warded around this area, and there might be a deep ward that has been placed by Weaver at nighttime, yes. But if this gets dewarded, your educated guess needs to be that it's a very obvious cliff ward and you just went into range. So whenever people deward very quickly, you know there must have been a ward. So the important thing is that if you place wards that try to take areas or movement paths that you already dewarded cleanly. So if you want to place this ward, that you move like this and ward from here to here preferably. Because if you move like this and here's no sentries, you could be spotted here and you don't know, and then it's very hard to guess. But it's also very hard for them to guess if the ward was placed here or here, if they had a ward, so you got this for you. So let's talk about the basic inventory you wanna have on a support. So to actually play an effective warding game, wards and sentries as well as a smoke is required and need to be at your disposal constantly, starting around the 8 to 10 minute mark. The important thing is that you do not overbuy sentries, and you basically want to have control over how you place sentries and how you place your wards. So whenever you walk into frequently warded areas, drop sentries early on to get an understanding basically how the enemy approaches the warding game. So you want to figure out if they ward standard or if they ward sneaky, and that's the information we want. And basically whenever you go for super risky D-wards, you can also use the smoke you bought and just play around the smoke. So in this example, we are moving in here, placing a very deep ward behind here, and I should have placed a sentry along the way, which I didn't do for unknown reasons, or actually I didn't. So basically I should have placed a sentry here to make sure I'm not spotted while placing this ward, but lucky for me it wasn't warded, and everything was good in this case. So let's talk a little bit about gameplay implications. So approaching D-wards, generally speaking, is always super dangerous when everyone is alive. So in this particular case, the entire enemy team would be alive. There's a lot of good wards up, so this is still the same game, by the way, and I just want to make sure that you understand that this is not some magic stuff about psychology and that I make everything up. So if we take a look at those wards and the initial wards that I showed around the 5-minute mark, just to give you an understanding how this really applies. So the first thing we saw was the Weaver at 5-minute mark, dewarding here with 2 wards, walking up, placing this ward and this ward. And we said that his mentality is he likes to have maximum vision. He goes for the super greedy wards that everyone will instantly deward in most cases. And look at this. 20 minutes later, same game. Cliff ward, cliff ward. So once you figure out how they think when it comes to their vision game, you will find the wards. Okay, so how do we approach this, generally speaking? So the thing is that on supports we cannot move around freely on the map in most cases, especially not during daytime. So we constantly need to find good opportunities to actually deward or smoke ourselves and go for some super risky deward plays. For example, if we want to deward this and everyone is alive, we can just solo smoke, walk over, place a sentry, give away our position once we're desmoked and get out as fast as possible. But as a rule of thumb, you always want to basically deward areas that your team is in, basically, so you get protection by them. So if we team fight here or we fight here, we kill some players, and the first thing you want to do right when this fight ends, move over, place sentries. Make sure everything is dewarded. Deward here, maybe even deward here, and place your own wards. This is like the perfect opportunity. Also, when the enemy team is splitting the map or they're approaching objectives on the other side of the map, so they're cross map. Let's say your team is mounting a defense on this tower and the enemy is pushing in like this and they have 4 or 3 players here. You know that there must be empty spots on the map, and this is basically when you can go deward. So if you want to deward this area, for example, you wait until the enemy is around this area, and if you have deep wards like this, you can see all the players, and once you see all of them, you can move deep in and start dewarding the more risky stuff. Then, generally speaking, dewarding after team fights should be the standard. So whenever you win a team fight, you instantly split away and try to deward whatever you can. And another thing is that before team fight starts, like when we move in here, it's also super beneficial to deward. So usually if here's a cliff ward and you're alone and everyone is alive from the enemy team, it can be super risky if the tier 1 tower is still up to move in here, especially if there's heroes with global stuff or very mobile heroes. So for example, if this is warded around the 24-minute mark and we walk over as a support, and they spot us instantly, the Void Spirit, for example, could TP into the fog, and the Prophet could TP behind us, and we are dead before we even reach this point. And this is super crucial that we have this kind of understanding. So whenever you go for dewards and no one is around, you're in danger. So you always want to make sure that you have a decent understanding where the enemy team is, and preferably you have teammates behind. So if you go for these kind of dewards around the high ground areas, especially when people are alive, either make sure that you know where the enemy is, or you have a lot of players behind you. So for example, if the Ursa would be farming here, the Queen of Pain is like farming here, and you're going for the deward and they TP in one player to go on you and the Prophet TPs in, you are basically the bait. So you go for the deward, they go for the kill, you have your team behind and you just bait them in and kill them. That's a good opportunity, but stay away from these kind of dewards on high grounds, especially if you have no one behind, you will just feed. So warding is basically a raw psychological game and trying to keep track of everything that's happening on the map, especially support wise, and also try to keep track of enemy movement, generally speaking, when you approach them, because people easily give away their wards by doing some weird movements if you approach them. And also keep in mind that you want to play around your team when you deward, and also try to keep track how enemies use their spells around team fights, because this is also a very good indicator where wards are placed. So for example, if you approach a team fight and the Patch would throw in a blind hook, and that is pretty on point, you most of the time already know that the movement path somewhere was warded and he simply knew. So that's it for the warding mentality, and my name is Untitled G, and thanks for watching.